So, Blood Enough is the name of the script that Saeed is writing, and this is the Blood Enough sample that he sent to me of 5 pages. Um, yeah, here we go. So, Saeed, tell us a little bit about the tone of your story. What is the genre, and how dark or light is it tonally in your
Yeah,
book?
it is. Yeah, thank you, Jordan. It's the genre is actually thriller drama, and story has a lot of tension as it starts with a an accidental murder, and how this traditional community react to such accidents. It's about family, it's about love, it's about sacrifice. It's about Rashta, the elder of the family. She's only 18-year old, and she has lost her both parents. Now she feels responsible. Now she's trying to save the family. She's trying um, to catch any threat to hold on, and uh, she's just trying to be that responsible girl. And some kind of she catches to the traditional orders to make things work, but at the end it wouldn't work, and she would have to make a really um, really hard decision. So the tone, I would say, it's had a lot of tension. It has there's a lot in the stakes. It's life and death. It's about remote communities that even authorities like police or, for example, different social empowers that, for example, apply the society rule would not apply at this community, and like they get used to solve things between themselves. So they have, for example, this um, strange traditions. Do I need to say more?
No, that's great. That's great. I appreciate it. We'll,
Of course.
sure you're going to chime in some more as we go. And I should point out that, I'm in the middle of Canada and you are on the far side of the world from me. So what I really appreciate is your willingness to share this with me and let me crash around in your sandbox, so to speak. But also, I just want to say up front that apologies in advance if there are cultural issues that I'm not familiar with.
Of
But
course.
I'll ask you questions and then try to understand what it is that you're communicating. But I did read through it very quickly once, and I got a sense of what you described to me. So that's good.
Yeah.
As a first draft, this is quite solid. So what I'm going to try to do is just distill and dial up every concept that you just described to me there and that I see on the page already. Like,
Amazing. Yeah.
I think that the location that the story takes place in could be important. So is this
Oh,
where in
yeah.
Iran are we?
Yes, we are in Iran, and we are in south of Iran. We have Iran has different um, territories, have different what's the word? Has different culture, different people. We have people from Arabs. We have people from Turk. We have different nations all together.
Mm,
So, for example, in south of Iran, especially in the south of Iran, because Iran is a religious country, there are so many traditions, so many restrictions about women. Always looking at them as a second hand citizen.
yeah, and
So yeah, yeah.
it's a melting pot of different types of cultures and personal beliefs, religious beliefs, that kind of stuff. Yeah. So this
Yeah.
town that has a mix of different
It's
types of
not a town. It's a village.
village. Okay.
Yeah.
Does it have a name? Or are you using a real village?
So this is the problem. I don't know because I'm not done with my research, but it is a village in the south. I
Okay.
don't have a name for it yet. So this is why it's a bit. Maybe this is why I'm lacking a bit.
Okay. I think what I'm trying to do here is suggest that you can get the story started and describe this melting pot or this pressure cooker. I think maybe is the angle that you'd be going at, because there are so many different points of view and strong beliefs mixing in a close proximity, that describing the village that this takes place in could set the tone for the story effectively and let people kind of figure out what you're up to immediately. Again, kind of establishing the tone of it. So this kind of description is just, me spitting it out off the top of my head. So I would suggest to you, what does a shot down over top of this village look like? And what can you say about that culture, about how close everyone is pressed together, if it is that kind of a thing? Or can we see, even from a bird's eye view, the details of different cultures kind of in different pockets of the same village? Is that a possibility? But just to explore that and to figure and to make that kind of choice for yourself, and then in 2 lines describe it in the way that you want and that feels right to you, so that the audience has a chance to appreciate the setting before we sink in to this particular story. Does that make sense?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So then we drop into one of the homes that we just looked at from above. Oops. No, bathroom.
No, that was bathroom. Yeah.
Yeah, that was bathroom. Okay. This is a bit of an issue. It's not a big deal if you're making your own movie, but a reader of a typical screenplay that you're like a spec screenplay that you're submitting doesn't know who that is yet. So
Yeah.
put that in your slug line is a little confusing because we can't appreciate what that means. So I don't know what it would be.
Yeah, it would be. It could be an indigenous home, maybe
Yeah.
something. Yeah, maybe something local. Yeah.
Something to that effect. And again, for your own movie, not important, but if you're submitting to other people, then you might want to think about that too, because obviously whatever's buried in the headers isn't going to be made apparent to people watching the movie. So you've got to be careful about which information you put there and which information you put in the action lines below.
Okay. Okay.
So then we're going to do, there's an interesting thing we could do here. You could start the movie with this stuff right here. This could be your first shot. Or, so we've kind of circled 3 different shots now. This potential overhead shot of the village itself, which will speak volumes about the type of story that you're telling. We hope that's the idea there. Then there's the shot we can see played out here inside the bathroom. But then there's this different shot as well, which is a close-up of blood dripping off of a pocket knife. So it's possible that before we show the bathroom, we show this, which I think is your intention, because that's where you started, but you're not describing it as a close shot. So if we start the movie with just this close-up of blood dripping off a pocket knife, it can be a little disorienting because we don't know where we are. Now we've fixed that to a certain degree because now we have this exterior overhead, but we could also do something like this.
Oh, nice.
Oops. And in fact, if we put a close on that, I don't think it would be appropriate to cap it because we're already making it a focal point in another way. So So now it's a bit messy, but so how's that suit? What do you think?
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
So
I
we've
like
got,
that.
now we're starting to think about things cinematically. And for anybody
This
that's
is
not,
this is like this is more visual. Like just I don't know how to like you added a specificity to it. Like kind of okay, this is like the close on. This
yeah,
is something. It's more in order. It seems.
right. Because as you develop your skills as a screenwriter, you do end up developing skills as an editor as well, even though that might not be apparent. You are choosing the shots. And the specificity of what you're describing on the screen is critical, right? Specificity and purity of ideas is absolutely critical. They say it's okay if a reader or an audience member doesn't understand the meaning of certain images, but they should never be confused about what the images actually are. So the more clarity that you apply to the visual elements of what is theoretically up on the screen, absolutely the better. Because the second that somebody has to stop and guess what the movie looks like in their mind, then you're dead. Like they are now kind of filling in the blanks. You should be forcing them to see exactly the movie that you're trying to make in their mind. And there should be as close to zero chance for misinterpretation or reinterpretation as is possible. So you can also see like there's a possibility here of getting really, really poetic with the themes that you're starting to play with, because we're going to say a lot with how you describe the village, and then we're going to cut to these bloody hands right away. So you might be able to experiment with like color blocking in that first shot, or something else, like if there's water nearby or a stream running through or next to the village, you might be able to use that flowing water. And sometimes the banks are kind of reddish in color. So can you tie that into the next shot, which is the hands and the water running over the hands of blood and that kind of stuff, you know, like a match cut of sorts. Anyway, there's a thousand things that you can think about and try to draw on, even with what you've got so far. And that's what this is fun for me, is playing with the ingredients that you already have in your story and trying to bring them into the foreground and use them effectively to communicate the themes and subject matter and the tone and all these things that you're interested in communicating. So yeah, this has now become kind of a sequence that's all working together instead of a disconnected series of shots. Because if you're not effective at composing your screenplay and not effective at your pagecraft, then one of the more common types of feedback you'll get is people will say, this is just a series of events. This is not yet a story. And they want to feel the kind of thematic elements and the subtext of the story. And if they don't, then it's just like they're flipping through postcards or something like that. And they don't feel like the story has any cohesion to it. So for a first draft, you already had really solid ideas in place. And now we're kind of dialing things up a little bit and trying to actually write a movie and not just the story. And in my experience, that takes like 3 drafts, 3 complete revisions at least before the movie starts to emerge off the page, so that when you read it, you really are seeing a film in your mind. That's one of my favorite phases of script development. It's like draft 3, draft 4, the movie really starts to appear, and it's super exciting. So it's fun to already kind of put the pieces together like that. Okay, so we've had our establishing shot overhead.
I'm sorry, Jordan. I have a question.
Sure.
So would it be so possible to start with the close on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could start that way. You could do it in the reverse. And in fact, then if I just find this to be interesting, you might be able to do without it. Like you might be able to start on, which I think was your
No, I
idea.
know. I mean, no, it's good. I'm just asking as a technicality. I wanted to know if there would be technical problem to a start. I mean, like a format or technical problem to start a film with a close on in a screenplay. I just wanted to know that.
It's been done, but the risk is that, again, you're giving the audience information that they might not be able to interpret. Like this close is pretty simple, so I don't think it's a particular problem, but audiences tend to want to know, where are we? What is this? Like, what's going on right now? So if you start with something a little too obtuse, or if you give them the blinders too soon, then sometimes they'll resist because they don't know where we are. That's like, I guess, the biggest question that people ask is, where are we right now? And that close-up might throw that. So at this point in the development of the script, I would suggest starting with like an establishing shot. But it's not like you're not going to find scripts out there that don't start with a close-up on something and then back away and open it. So that's the writer's choice of parsing information. You know, like that's part of our job, is to decide what the reader knows and when they know it. So this is kind of what we're doing here right now. That could work just fine. I tend to be a little more conservative when I start out, because once you go through and clean this thing up and you get it to like a good solid first draft, second draft kind of thing, then I would send it out for feedback from people that I work with, like friends, co-writers, that kind of stuff, other professionals, just for a quick round of feedback. Is this working? How close am I? Are you confused at all? That type of thing. And then based on the feedback that I got, I'd probably make the choice as to whether or not I'd want to start with the close-up or whether I'd want to start with the establishing shot based on all the different feedback that I got. And every round of feedback that I get, I tend to use a minimum of 3, no more than 6 people, because too many is mud. It can be confusing. Too few doesn't really give you an idea. And the first thing you're going to do is ignore everybody that says it's awesome and there's no problems, and ignore everybody that says it's terrible and there's nothing but problems. Put all those comments aside and look for the ones that have notes about the same elements. So the pack in the middle that say, I didn't understand where we were, or who was holding that knife in that shot, you know, questions about confusion. If 2 or 3 people bring up the same detail, then you know you've got something you need to address. But get rid of the extremes, because it's not going to serve you any good.
Okay. Just a quick something that just came in my mind. So, for example, to do that and also make it a question, I could start the scene with something that you wrote, but I could have a little action in a wide angle of this boy running to one of those houses that we have as a major. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
we have the military part of cultures, beliefs, houses, preschool, and then there's a boy. There's a, for example, a teenager that is running. Yes, exactly.
Something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, it's great. See, that's helping the audience move through the scene now. You've created a nice visual logic to it that's going to pull people inside that house. So when we cut inside now, they're going to know which house it is that we're inside.
Oh, this is exciting, man. Okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great idea. Okay, so we've now seen, and these words here are going to be really, really important. So this is fine for a first draft, but I've chosen an adverb frantically. And if we choose the right verb, then we don't need adverbs. If we choose the right noun, we don't need adjectives. And your real estate on the page is so valuable that you do want to kill off as many words as possible. It can't be fat, dense blocks of text anywhere. So runs frantically is one way of saying it. But what's a single word that would suggest that same idea? What do you think?
Okay, let me think. So, for running, we have different things: jogging, stride, amble, idle. Oh, nice, nice.
Right? So we're trying to capture the desperation that he's feeling right now. He's running afraid. We can't say that, because if we say he runs afraid, then we're actually entering the mind of the character and we're explaining what they feel. Bolts is good. Yeah. Bolts sometimes suggests more confidence. So I might not go there, but you're going down the right road. These are great questions and great suggestions. But I think what Said wants to capture here is his desperation, his fear, like the trembling.
Yes.
He's tripping and falling as he runs because he's running too quickly. He's desperate, all these kinds of things. So what is an ideal verb? Another screenwriting kind of a guru type out there describes this as weaponizing your words. There can be no boring words here. And especially nouns and verbs. You've got to go back. After your first draft, that's fine. Just get it out. Accept that the first draft's going to be rough. Everyone's first drafts are rough. They're, this is better than average, by the way, because a lot of them are really garbage. That's not a problem. Don't panic about that. Then when you go back and start fixing the logic first, which is my first pass, go back and kind of polish up the logic so that people can follow the story at least before we get into the real deep Pagecraft of, again, bringing out these thematic ideas. The first thing you want to go back and do is look at your nouns and verbs and figure out exactly what the perfect noun and or verb would be in any particular case. Attack those first and make them as dynamic, interesting, sexy, dark, powerful. Some people say muscular as a way to describe those excellent words. And just think a moment, what is the point of this scene? So we've just talked about how we want to establish the setting. We want to establish the tone. We want to establish, now we've talked about, we want to establish the frame of mind that our character is in when we go and we follow them inside the house. And we're doing that all in this one shot and in 2 paragraphs, as effectively as we possibly can. That all sound good?
Amazing.
Okay, so then we'll keep the close on the knife and the blood, and then we're going to go into the house now. We know it's his hands. 16 is maybe a more efficient way to do that.
Okay.
So I'm pulling from down here because you introduced him, but we weren't sure where he was inside the room. So I had trouble kind of picturing the layout of the room. And later on, if we come back to this location, then you don't have to spend as much time or effort describing it. But
Yeah, right.
When you're at a location for the first time, give the reader a little bit of detail if you can, if it's important to the story. And what's super important is that he's standing in front of the mirror. Now we've proven to the audience that it was his hands washing, just because he's standing over the sink. And I might even go that far. Okay.
Okay.
Let's see here. As red as his hands, gasping for air. Okay. Masood, 16, stands in the mirror. Trembling, yeah. And I'm probably going to go back and condense that. But right now, those are important details to me, so I'm going to write them out and overdo it. First drafts are typically longer, at least for me anyway, because I tend to overdo it and put a few too many details in there. And then when I come back, I'll condense. The mirror is the most important thing, but I do want to mention the sink so that we guarantee that the reader knows it's the same guy from this close-up. So I'm not going to let that go yet. His hands, his eyes as red as his hands.
Jordan, what is tie?
Sorry, typos.
I think so.
Okay, and I'm trying to clarify the details that you want to focus on. So his red eyes, he's been crying or something like that has been going on. That's good, that's an important detail. The blood doesn't wash off. I'm kind of saying these things matter-of-factly, and then I'd likely go back and weave this sentence together as a single. Okay, how we bundle up these individual concepts is really important. So one of the real basic guidelines is that each paragraph is a different shot from the camera. And again, we've established that you're not allowed to talk about camera shots, with a few exceptions like that close on. There's no way to get around that. So that's as close to an actual camera direction as you're going to get. But here, when you write a paragraph, you're choosing how much detail can I put in this shot, this paragraph, before I start to overwhelm the audience. So in that case, you might want to parse it out and create a second paragraph and a second shot. So here, Masood stands in the mirror over the sink trembling, his eyes as red as his hands. The blood won't. Yeah, I might even do this. Won't, which is now suggesting that he's tried and it won't come off. He looks up in the mirror is another person behind him in the mirror. Okay. Now we're introducing Rasta. So this is a shot of him at the mirror. It might even be a profile shot. And then we get a direct shot of his reflection in the mirror and we see who's standing beside him. So that's a second shot. And now we're going to introduce Rasta. And her gaze doesn't change. That's, I don't think, the most effective word. That's suggesting her kind of emotional state and the emotion of her face is changing. But I think you're just saying she's looking back and forth between.
Yeah, it's just eyes movement. Yeah.
So if there's a nervousness, we might say dart between Masood, his bloody hands, and the pocket knife. Yeah. Or we could say this, darting between Masood, his bloody hands, and the pocket knife. Okay. So this is a pretty solid scene now. The only thing that I would suggest is to, and it's not always necessary, people argue about this stuff all the time, and I don't see the point in the arguments, but I'm going to suggest that character introductions are a really unique opportunity to get much more poetic with your writing and to encourage your readers to invest in the characters. Like, you don't get a chance to introduce a character more than once. So as you describe Masood here, how can you make maybe a 2-word description of his essence? And by essence,
in that scene, do you mean, or for example, as a general term?
Character introductions. So this is a good example of introducing 2 characters, but we don't really share anything insightful about these characters with the audience except the situation they find themselves in. So we're describing them in this space and in this moment, but this is the rare opportunity where we get to show the audience a glimpse of who these people are, like, internally. Again, that's what I'm talking about when I say, what's the essence of Masood? If you had to capture him in just a few words, how would you describe him to make him sound different from everybody else in the world? Like, what makes him completely unique? An element of his point of view, an element of the beliefs that he holds, and specifically the limitations that he has at this point in his life. Because part of what we want to do when we introduce characters is reveal the potential for change. So typically, characters show up on the scene with some kind of baggage, some kind of unresolved thing. They sometimes refer to it as the wound. And that has helped inform who they are when we first meet them. And then through the adventure, the story, they're changed. They evolve. They're adapting and growing under the pressure that your story puts them under. And they become a different version of themselves, with a happy ending, a more fully realized version of themselves at the end. Or in the case of a tragedy, they double down on their flaws and it ends up kind of destroying them in the end. The mechanics of it are the same. Doesn't matter which way you go. But I would encourage you to think, how can I make the reader fall in love with these characters right here and right now? Give them something sympathetic to lock onto. They call it identification. Like, this is the period in which you're trying to get your reader to identify with your characters. That doesn't mean they have to be likable. Some people say that. I don't believe in that. They have to be fascinating. And we have to be able to see a little bit of ourselves in them. And then we'll be happy to attach ourselves to them and follow them on this adventure. So it probably isn't going to come out fast in this, here today. But I would want to know, what is the essence of Masood and what is the essence of Rasta? And then,
yeah. Well, I say that Masood is a cocky teenager that just a second ago he thought that he owns the world. Now he's in the worst position of his life that he could never imagine. I could say that he's some kind of a hothead kind of teenager, that that you wouldn't imagine that would find himself in this kind of a situation. Okay.
Yeah. Now this is feeling clumsy, so I'm going to trim that back. And I might even want to separate that because it's nice and powerful. Or package it like that instead. Okay. So how would you describe her?
Um, Responsible. She in the backstory, Rasta and her family just lost their parents, and she kind of find herself as a responsible, as a kind of a caring, as a father and mother to all her siblings.
All right. And again, this is first draft. We're just throwing stuff against the wall here at the moment. So it could certainly get better, but do you think that we have a better shot at getting people invested in these characters now that we've given them a little piece of who they are at their
I
essence?
think so. Yeah, I think so. This is really interesting because I've seen this. I've seen this in other screenplays, but I did not yet dared myself to add something like this for my character. But I really loved it. For example, I see this from Aaron Sorkin. Sometimes even McDonald makes this kind of a description that throws you inside their soul, that throws you inside them.
Yeah.
How do you feel? How do you act? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So, and this is the only place you get to do this, right? You are not allowed to do this kind of thing anywhere else in the script. But they bend the rules here at character introductions. And again, this gives you an opportunity to be more poetic and to capture, like you said, the soul, what I describe as the essence of the character. So now, as the reader absorbs that, we get, okay, this guy's got a short temper. She's the voice of reason. I already kind of get a better grasp of what this scene is going to be like. And especially in shorts, right? You don't have a lot of time for character development. So these shorthands, I think, are really, really important, and you should take advantage of them whenever you have the opportunity. So yeah, I already know these characters better and I feel closer to them for it. So hopefully that works for everybody that reads it. Stanza there. Yeah, okay. So we end this scene with him bursting into tears. And the slang term for this final element of a scene is sometimes referred to as the button. So how you end a scene is a button. It's like a particular sharp image summarizing what the scene was about, or a line of dialogue that really underlines what the scene was about. So you've got a nice action here with him bursting into tears, but you could probably make it even more dramatic.
Oh, nice. Yeah, this is good.
So now we're what I call parsing or spreading things out and giving these moments a chance to breathe instead of them just coming rapid fire. Da, 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 da. Now you're suggesting that there's a quiet moment where the two just stand in silence reflecting on what has just happened. They don't even know what to say to one another yet. You could describe them as being wide-eyed or afraid. You could do a lot of things with how you describe their staring at one another. But the most important detail is just that after that moment, he breaks down. So trying it just like this, pretty stripped down. And this is how you set up a beat. Until then, that kind of stuff. If you read action scripts, you'll see them use this a lot. The Bourne movies in particular have an interesting style where you see that just like little fragments of action and they separate them all out and give them each one of the beats their own line and paragraph. And that makes it a lot easier to absorb. And it gives each one of those moments more clarity. Yeah. And so again, whenever you get close to action, then I recommend that you read the Bourne kind of scripts, which is a full-on action movie. Even if you're not writing an action movie, whenever you're writing anything that's more action-y, action-like, learn from those guys because they do really separate the action out in an effective way. Yeah, Oliver, I just noticed people are wondering if we could share.
Yeah, I was just wondering, can everyone see Jordan's screen okay? Yeah, you can pin. So if you guys can't see his screen, if you hover over Jordan's, if you go onto the people in the meeting and you can see Jordan Morris presentation, on the three dots, you can click pin to screen. So then you can get a bigger picture of his screen that he's sharing. Hopefully that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Oliver.
Yeah.
We want to make sure everybody's seeing it. Yeah, this would be frustrating to just hear this like on the radio or something. Okay, hopefully everybody can make that work. If you can't, then just keep asking. And put some notes on the side, and we'll stop and make sure you can. Okay, thanks. So now we've created maybe a dramatic moment here that the scene didn't have previously, or we've underlined it so that it's more dramatic than it was. I think that's more accurate to say that because you had it in there. His emotional outburst was in there. But this nice quiet moment beforehand can suggest a lot about their relationship too. Like obviously they trust one another. They've known one another for a long time. There's something really desperate going on here, and they're sharing a quiet moment, and then he's overwhelmed. So I thought that might be a more powerful moment. Okay, so we're going to leave that. We're going to move to the living room. Moments later sounds fast.
Okay.
Later, maybe. I tend to do this too. I do the
Jordan, can I ask you something? Because there was something that Anthony dropped just a few minutes earlier.
Sure. Yeah.
Is it okay when I'm doing the sub location, I use comma?
Yep.
Is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes it's a dash. I like the comma because I like the three different regions being distinctly different. So obviously interior to exterior, the dot, the period there kind of separates it. I leave a gap. I don't let this crowd like that. It just doesn't look as nice. So separating it makes it a separate thing. Then you have the most general details of the location and then the more specific if you need them. Try to avoid going to 3 sections of location descriptions if you can. And obviously, if it's not, maybe it's not obvious to everybody, you never want your scene headings to wrap around to a second line. That looks really ugly on the page. So you want to be as concise as possible. And then I prefer, there's no rules about this. This is just personal preference, but I prefer the double dash before we get into time of day. Because again, it sort of like separates everything into its own little corner and gives it its own unique visual signature. And again, we would probably, we're not going to do that here because we established up here, we're just calling it Indigenous Home. We'll see whatever it was, we have to be consistent. So it has to remain exactly the same every time we go back to this location. Whatever you choose to do, it has to be the same or you're going to confuse people. Okay. So later suggest soon later, but moments later is like they ran from one room to another. That seems a little fast in my mind, and I don't think we need the moments part. So I've chopped that out. In fact, there are people out there that make a solid argument saying that you don't need this at all because all scenes are later unless you're doing flashbacks or some kind of special device. And if it's very clear that we're in the same or an adjacent location, then you don't even need that. But this is fine. I don't think this is in the way. And just to make it perfectly clear, that's the conservative choice in my mind. So I'm good with that. Okay, so now we're in a different room. Rasta is looking out her window at what? So you cut to the point of view. So tell me why you thought you would go to her point of view so that we see only what she is seeing and we don't see her. Why was that important for you?
Yes. So as we go, as we advance in the story, Rashta has a trauma. She has something in her past, something that is related to what is happening throughout the story. She has a trauma of. Should I tell the backstory of this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So when she was a kid, she has a cousin, and she was a sacrificial bride, and in this kind of a tradition, she was only 8 9 years old, and in this time when the girl is transferred to another community, another village, they still behave to her as the relatives of the murderer person, of the murderer family. So they are so bad treated that most of the time they do suicides.
Mm.
And one of the most feeling suicide is self-burning.
Wow.
So it's like this trauma just came onto her, because that in the future, that makes the stakes of she would not bug out her own sister to have the same fate. So
Okay.
this is a bit moment characterization, because this is like the ghost of Rasta.
Yeah.
So
Understood.
so this is what in the beginning she's there. She's thinking about this trauma just came back again to her life, as never left at her. This is something that we gonna discover as we go further in the story, because like in the middle of the story, in the act 2, I'm gonna have more details on this, because there are women in the village that they consider this as an honor. This is a big honor. I'm doing this for my community. I'm doing this for my family. So this is not a bad thing. This is honor, and they believe that everybody in the community should celebrate this.
Yeah.
But Rasta has a different perspective of this. So this is this is what connected to this is why I used POV, because this is something that she only sees, not other
Yeah.
people.
Okay. That's great. Understood. That's a powerful concept. And certainly you want to be as effective about communicating that kind of thing as possible.
Exactly, yeah. And
Uh,
I'm a bit nervous about it as the story, because I want to work on this, but I don't want to make it how to say this too fatty, you know. I don't want to make it heavy, but
yeah.
I want to make it effective, because it plays an important role in the story.
Right. And you use the term ghost. And for anybody listening that's not familiar with that term, this is kind of a trauma that she has suffered that haunts her. It's not literally the ghost of Rasta, it's Rasta's ghost, which means something that is like haunting her mind, haunting her emotionally, that she can't shake off. It's an unresolved pain that continues to cause her pain, that's going to follow her through the story. Okay. So that being clear, the issue is that if we cut to her POV, you might be starving yourself of an opportunity, because what might be more revealing is if we can see her watch that image, so that we can see her face and watch her react to it. If you're in a POV, we don't get to see her respond to this image that she's being haunted by. So again, is that the right choice? It's early. I don't want to say for sure one way or the other, but I think I want to see her suffer from that so that I can appreciate it. So this right here, this first line is going to be really, really important. We're in a new space, and I would recommend establishing a little bit about the space before we get into the action, because I cannot picture this living room. We've never been here before in the script. So what's the basic layout, and what else can you tell us about the story by what is in the room and the layout of the room? Are there religious iconography in here? Is it
Yeah, we have religious, and we don't have any sofa. We don't have any couches. There are like I don't know, like what can I say, traditional pillows. So they are mostly Kurdish families. So they have this traditional, really beautiful miniatures um, oh my God, sketches that on the pillows, and they used to sit on them. They are a bit religious. For example, pages. There is this craftsmanship for making for making rugs. Persian rug is a really famous term, because it's so deep in our history. So it's most, so we can say it's traditional. It's not modern.
Yeah.
It's not, yeah. It's big, but at the same time, it's like um, yeah. Thank you, Ahmed. Yeah, he knows what I'm talking. He's from Middle East. He knows what I'm saying. So yeah, it's big. It's traditional, but it's like 100 years ago.
Uh, so that what I just did there was try to get rid of what they call, I should have kept it up, orphans. So when
Okay.
you got, let's see here, are there any obvious ones? No. So when we say orphans, we're just talking about a sentence that wraps around to the next line with only one or two words. That's really inefficient. And in a later draft, I would target those, and I'd want to either kill them off and compress the sentencing so that it was down to only 2 lines instead of 2 and 2 words. Or if I couldn't possibly get it compressed, then I would wonder, okay, what else can I do with this space? Because I could fill out the rest of the line without affecting how the script is presented on the page. It's not going to eat up any more lines. So is there another piece of information that I could put in the description that would be worthy of it, of that space? But here I just trimmed it down to 2 clean lines. And then now we've established the room. Now we're going to get into the action, which is Rasta is looking. Okay, here's the thing that I want everybody to be aware of too. This is called a gerund. It's a verb acting like a noun, and you want to kill those. You don't is a red flag. That's how you do it instead. If that's the verb you want, then
I'm sorry, Jordan, but I've seen this. I've seen this, that, for example, screenwriters, if I describe the character that is in the middle of doing something, they use this. So this is wrong.
well, that's too strong a language. Do you need to do that? Do you?
Okay.
Can you reclaim those words? Can you clean up the space and clean up the page and create more white space? I'm using a black background, so white space, the term white space doesn't make any sense here. But white space refers to all the unused space on the page, and you want as much of that as possible, generally speaking. Again, each established screenwriter that's got a nice fat resume and a big body of work doesn't have to deal with this kind of thing. They can do whatever the heck they want. Tarantino bends and breaks rules all the time. We, as new writers breaking in, don't get to do that as often. If you're making your own movies, then you get to break all the rules you want too. But if you want to sell your work or work with other people within the industry, then be more conservative. Don't get frustrated by these kind of guidelines. Work with them and use them to your advantage. So Rasta looks out her window is just a cleaner way to say it.
Yeah.
So is as any of those that turns the verb in, like whenever you see ing, that's probably a chance for you to clean that up and make that more concise. I don't like using the terms right or wrong because, again, it's not so much about rules. Pagecraft does have rules. Storycraft doesn't really have rules. And if you break too many of these Pagecraft rules that people are sensitive to, then they're maybe going to throw your script aside, even if it's excellent. Because readers have to read dozens, hundreds of scripts constantly, and they're just looking for an excuse to throw your work away and get on to the next script.
Wow.
It's sad, but as people have been there for days, weeks, months, years reading, they're trying to make their job more efficient. And they're trying to weed out the things that they think are weaker by less polished writers. And those are one of the things that sends a flag up the pole for them. Okay, this person's using gerunds all the way through their script. Does that
Wow.
affect the story? No, but it's a reflection of maybe their professionalism. So we're going to throw that one aside because I've got a stack of 6 feet tall of more scripts that I can choose from. So my recommendation just is don't give anybody any excuse to throw your stuff aside. If you can tell the story that you want to tell in an effective way by being more conservative with your pagecraft, then go that route. Why wouldn't you? It gives you the better shot of getting watched and noticed. And then you get onto the conversation about the story itself and not just how you presented it on the page. Silas, they're referred to as orphans. So if we can find another one in here, let's see. You're pretty good. Oh, here's one. So this is an obvious orphan right here. So I would want to kill that because we can read a whole line.
Mm.
Okay. Let's go back up here. Yeah, and again, these are just first draft, and this is not Said's work. So Said would go back in here and kind of create his own stuff and point out the details of the room that are most important to him in the story.
Of course, I use that. I'll use that absolutely.
So Rostazan is looking out the window. So we were talking about the choice of going into POV versus us watching her have a vision. So there may be a version of this scene where she peers out the window and then we watch her become upset by whatever it is that she's looking at. And then if Masood comes over and looks out the window and sees nothing, then we're saying a lot. So I don't think I'm going to be able to crack exactly what would be the most cinematic and effective version of this scene in just the seconds that we've got, because I want to get through more of the script right now. But I would suggest thinking about that. How can you capture her? And then as your producer, I'm trying to wonder, is the timing for this good here? Or is it interrupting Masood's story? Here's a question for you. Whose story is this? I know it has multiple characters in it, but if you had to choose one to assign the point of view, whose story?
Rasta. This is Rasta's story.
Okay. Okay, then I think the choice of doing it here is the right thing to do that. Because we were introduced to a supporting character first.
Yes, exactly.
And now we're being introduced to her. So how do we make her introduction as dramatic as possible? And I would go back here and make sure that her introduction is as dramatic as possible. If you and I were working together and you were, if I was kind of coaching you, I'd say, okay, if this is her story, then we'd want as dramatic a reveal of her introduction as possible. And then it would make sense that we could follow her into this next scene. Because as of right now, the audience might be assuming that this is Masood's story. And we wouldn't want them to get that confused about whose story it is. Otherwise, we might rattle them if there is a really distinct shift in whose story we follow in the future. Does that make sense? I'm kind of rambling as I think about this while I talk about it.
So, yeah, I totally get you. You're saying that because I have the opening is with Masood. It's gonna make this misunderstanding that he's the main character, but actually Rasta is the main character.
The possibility exists. Yeah, that possibility exists. That's all I'm suggesting. I don't know that it's a problem yet, but orange flags, so to speak, go up in the back of my mind when I'm reading through these things, because I'm trying to look at this through the eyes of a reader, for somebody who has just sat down and is exposed to this for the very first time. They don't know you, they don't know the story. How are they going to interpret this? I'm trying to cut them off at the pass and eliminate problems before they happen. So I think this is a really important scene, and you and I would talk about this for a while, and then we'd probably recompose it and make sure that this really important moment where she gets this haunting vision is really showcased effectively. But for the sake of this kind of engagement here today, let's move on. Okay, so he notices her and he asks her a question, which is great. And his concern for her, does he walk over and kind of touch her on the shoulder, that kind of stuff? Rasta
Tap
snaps out
on
of
the
it.
shoulder. Yeah, tap her on the shoulder.
Yeah. Rasta snaps out of it. She turns and looks at Masood, nervously looking back. Okay. Moving on to the next concept here. Rasta snaps out of it. She turns and looks at Masood, nervously looking back. So this is kind of a muddy description because it's not 100% clear who is nervously looking back. It could be read that this is assigned to her. So there's a little bit of confusion here. And this, in fact, is implied. This is kind of explaining things. I'm particularly sensitive to things that try to explain any details to the audience. So if she literally moves suddenly and snaps out of it, and you describe that movement, then you don't have to explain the meaning of it here.
Mm-hmm.
So and again, that snapping out of it, what's the better verb here? Yeah, she turns quickly, whatever the verb is that you want. What did you suggest, Oliver?
Oh, sorry, jolts.
Jolts is more like a vertical.
Yeah.
We want that quick snap of the head, like
Taking it back.
Cox. No, like Cox and looks. I don't know.
Yeah, this is fun. I hope everybody else enjoys this kind of thing as much as I do, because hunting and looking for your words, your best words, is fun, I think. For us to that's not perfect, but you kind of get the idea behind it.
Snaps and look at message. Okay.
Looks is weak. There's a better word there too. We can capture his emotional state with this word.
Gaze. Gaze is back.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm trying to prevent it wrapping around, but I'm going to have to. Because that's better.
Mm.
Anyway, we could play with this for a little while and clean it up. There's a way to get this down to one line, or we bundle it with something that happens next, or we add some other interesting context to this to make use of this empty space we've got here, if we can't get it cut down anymore. So she gazes outside the window one more time. So we don't have to say one more time.
Nice.
There is another kind of yellow flag. We don't necessarily need that.
Nice.
Trim, trim, trim. Suddenly we're down to one line. And this is another action, so we want to separate that. Oh, okay, I did it. Okay. We might be able to bundle those. Oh no, I got to get rid of another word to make that work. So this is starting to feel kind of same, like this rhythm here of 3 lines in a row, 3 single lines doesn't look right to my eye. So I might want to break that up and put this here. And in fact, the second half of the line is explaining. It kind of gets more interesting, in my opinion, if you just trim that off.
Mm.
It's saying, like, if she says pack your bags, then she's saying we're leaving.
Oh, we don't know on the nose dialogue.
Yes.
Yeah, for anybody listening that's not familiar with that term, OTN, or on the nose dialogue, is simply when a character says the most obvious at the most obvious time. You might write that way in your first draft. That's perfectly fine. But as soon as you get the opportunity, go back and kill all that off, and try to put as much subtext in there as is possible. So have people say as little as possible, at least early on in your career as a writer. I know we all like to think that we're Tarantino or we're Aaron Sorkin, who use a lot of dialogue in their work, and it's wonderful. But until you really get a good grasp on how to use dialogue to tell your story, don't lean on dialogue any more than you have to. Try to get your scenes to be silent movies if at all possible, and use actions and kind of images to tell the story, because the priority is images, actions, and then dialogue, in that order as far as how you tell your story. And too many people lean on dialogue too quickly. But I think this line just suddenly gets more interesting when she just says, "Pack your bags," and then she rushes out of the room. We don't even need that side look.
Yeah, I was trying to give the sense of that frustration of Rashta, because like he knows that this is his what was the word, she blames him. This is his fault. This is like this frustration, this nervous that is coming is from him. So I was trying to like the side look was that, for example, that sign of her of being so frustrated and angry with him.
Yeah. And just by changing the order of events here, this line now suggests more frustration than it did before, I think. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, why not? Yeah.
And if you really zero in on that moment, you can load it even further. As an example, I'm just going to add something, but of course, you're not obligated.
No, man, I'm going to use it. Oh, nice.
Now this might be too clumsy, right? This might be overdoing it a bit, but now when we read that line or we hear her deliver that line, we know that she knows that they're in danger.
Okay.
So we're just suggesting more conflict here, and that the stakes are high. So we might even put another like this. And now we're breaking things up. So it's got a lot more white space on the page here. We're not trying to clump too much in the way of action and description together, and we're not trying to clump too much in the way of dialogue together. We're breaking it up nice and regularly throughout. So she snaps out of it because she was just horrified by this kind of haunting image that she's got. And that's what's running through her head now. She's in survival mode. The first thing she spits out, again, just a suggestion, is, "You've killed us. Like, this is going to be the end of this, what you've done." And then she looks back out the window, "No fire, no screaming girl. Pack your bags," and then darts out of the room. So we're trying to ratchet up the tension and the block, and effectively make the blocking more interesting of the scene. Blocking meaning how characters move through the space. Because if they just stand there and deliver lines at one another, that's a tennis match. And that's really boring. So you kind of got to think of what they're doing and the actions that they're undergoing while they deliver these lines. How do they work together? And if you do ever have to have a character that's explaining things, like is often the case with some thrillers, some like Peck thrillers, where they've got to do, if we don't do this, then the satellite's gonna, and then the missile will fire, and like they've got to explain what goes wrong to the audience, because there's no way to make that organic. When that happens, and when you're stuck with people having to do an info dump like that, bury it under action. Make the character do something else while they spit that stuff out. The old Will Ferrell movie, not Will Ferrell, Will Smith, a very different person. Will Smith movie called Enemy of the State did that really, really well. It's one of my favorite examples. the two characters are explaining the situation to the audience, and it's just a lot of monologuing, but they do it in a really exciting way because they keep the scene moving while they do it. Worth having a look at. Okay, so I think we've got some more kind of intrigue in here. Like, what does she mean when she says that? So there's a lot of subtext here. I'm just creating it. This is not your voice, but there's something interesting going on here. And now she says, pack your bags. And in fact, that makes a good button. So we don't even need that. I don't know that anything we do past that is going to be more effective. I would want to talk to you if you were my client about that. Like, what more can we do with this scene? But it seems to me like that's an excellent button right there. Pack your bags. Okay, now we're back in the bedroom. You've chosen to put continuous up here.
Yes.
What were you thinking?
Exactly right after that.
What was that?
Because it's just after that. There's no like there are continuously.
Okay, so we followed her into, so that would mean that continuous should be back here, and that this could be a mini slug.
Oh, okay. Great.
Continuous. So this is suggesting that we're going to follow a character through multiple locations. Like if somebody walked in the front door, walked through several rooms, and then walked out the back door into their backyard, that would be a continuous shot. You're suggesting in one form or another that the camera is kind of floating behind them and following them as they walk.
Yes, exactly.
So we would want to establish that device in this scene so that we would tell the reader that we're going to follow the character into the next location, which is the, the bedroom, maybe. Something like that. And this is a real kind of modern mini slug. They're really sexy and really minimalist. Not everybody writes in this style, but this is a possibility now too. You don't start a brand new scene. You just use a mini slug, kind of resetting the terms of the scene. So this is kind of a sequence and not just a singular scene now. Okay. So we've moved into another room. If the tone of this past scene is correct, that stakes are high. This is life and death now. Both of the characters that we've established are kind of freaked out for different reasons. Then having her breeze in is not the right verb.
Oh.
Breezing suggests.
Jordan, because the girls are sleeping, I thought that I'm gonna use this verb because I'm gonna say that she's
being careful not to make noise.
Careful. Yeah, she's a bit careful. So she breezes in.
Yeah.
Like other.
But breezing suggests no stress at all. Really effortless, like casual, comfortable. Silas has got a question. What was that question? Where is it here? Okay, Silas, not sure if this question makes sense, but do you still use mini slugs as scene header within the script program so that when broken down, it's labeled as its own scene number? Yeah, that would likely be how it's tackled. When it moves from a spec script status like this to a shooting script, they'll number each individual scene, and the bedroom is a different shot, definitely like a new setup, so they would number that one separately. Yeah. Okay, so we want to suggest that she's walking in carefully. And we're in a new scene, so we have to.
But you know, as I'm thinking about this, because she's about to wake up the girls, it doesn't matter if she's careful, because at the end of the scene, this is just a little one that it shows that she want to mix them up because they're packing, they're leaving, so it doesn't really matter if she's careful.
Yep, that's great. And in fact, I still want to establish the space before we watch her sweep in, stride in, whatever it is. Something more like that. This is now messy, so two little girls.
So then you establish what is inside the bedroom, and then the complicated.
Yeah, and this is let's talk about this for a second. Introducing characters at the same time is hard on an audience member, hard on a reader. because you're asking them to appreciate the individuality of each character and then retain that and be able to refer to it later as they read. So this formal introduction of two characters in exactly the same moment is tough, but obviously necessary for this scene. So we might have Rasta come in and kind of weight both character individually, and that gives you a chance to kind of separate the introductions of these next two characters a little bit more, and it gives you the opportunity, if they're important characters, if they justify it, to again capture their essence in a character introduction as well. If these are really tertiary characters, that might not be necessary, but I might think about, again, following her through the room as she wakes up each individual character, which will help parse and separate these kind of beats out a little bit.
Okay, but how am I going to do that if I'm going to describe both of them there?
Yeah, so you've got two little girls asleep on the floor, and then again, a couple more details about what the room looks like itself.
Okay.
Then she sweeps in, wakes up. Nope. Sorry. I'm trying to move too quickly and I'm making mistakes. Next up. I'm making a real mess here, but I'll clean it up. To that seems clumsy.
Yeah. Delvin is there. Raha and Delvin, they're both like this.
Sorry, what did you say?
Delvin is a girl. Raha and Delvin,
Okay.
they're both girls.
My mistake. Okay. So then you've got an opportunity up here to maybe put in a couple more details about Raha and Delvin. And if they're just getting jerked out of a sleep,
Yeah.
would they not say something like, what's going on? Or
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
would Raha, Rasta, I should say, would she interject something like, don't talk, we're leaving?
Or for example, an idea. Maybe she wakes up Raha because Raha is the older one, and she tells Raha that wakes up Delvin.
Yeah, I like where you're going with that.
Yeah.
Here's where having her explain it a little more makes more sense. You know, you're giving context to these kids that are just being woken up out of a cold sleep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Again, I'm just repeating words, which is never a good idea. Wakes her. Okay, and then we can package this. Rasta scrambles down, wakes her, both of them. Grab bags.
I'm sorry because the both of them was the waking up. This is just Rashta grabbing bags and luggages because they just woken up and yeah.
Okay. Okay. We can trim all that down to. I'm putting an extra space in here just to make the scenes okay. Tighter, more actiony, and I think you've got an opportunity for more character moments in here too. Here's another thing that some people don't think about. You want to write in a style that is exciting for an actor to read.
Mm.
You want to write roles that actors are going to enjoy performing. So you've got to load them with all kinds of character and motivation, and make all of these things thematically relevant so that it feels like it's a cohesive, coherent part of your story too. But now we've got Rasta being much more of a leader type, and this chain of command, she wakes up Raha, and then Raha wakes up Delvin. That's much easier on the brain of the reader as well. Instead
Yeah,
of
this is especially because Iranian families, they're like they're this hierarchy of based on age. So it makes sense that, for example, she asked the older one to wake up the little one.
yeah, and it's a much tighter. Like, how many lines did we just trim back out? But everything that you wanted this scene to do is still in here. We're just doing it much more efficiently and much more succinctly. And each of the characters is kind of more unique from one another in this version than it was previously. And as I would work through a client, we do that. We find character moments for everybody, because there's no dead wood. Every character that's in your script has to be special and help towards telling the story. And if they don't, cut them, because the old adage, if you can cut it, you should cut it, is true. Like, if you can pull a detail or a character or a location out of your story and not hurt the story, then you should do it. That's really important, especially for new screenwriters, because we need to be able to make these things for as cheap as possible. That helps make your scripts more attractive to potential producers as well. And if you're making your own movie, then why wouldn't you want the most efficient way to tell the story so that you don't have to deal with as many actors or locations or props or what have you? So yeah, always a good idea. If you can cut it, do that. Like, one of the first edits through a first draft, like your big messy first draft, is to go back and chop as much as you possibly can out and push the logic of it. Just keep cutting until it's not possible to follow the story anymore, and then you've gone too far. But until then, cut everything you possibly can. Again, at least in the early stages of your career, do that and just focus on the nuts and bolts of the story and make that stuff work really, really well. Okay, we got maybe a time for one more scene here. An introduction of a new character from that outside. Okay, again, I like that space there and there, and this is not a thing. Okay, exterior, Rastasam today. DR. Like traditional clothes. Approaches the house. Okay, so the order in which you share information with the reader is really, really key. I'm going to share with you a term that nobody's ever heard of before, and I can't even remember where I learned it. It's the paraprosdokian. It's a writing device whereby the most important element of the phrase or sentence or paragraph or even page is the last detail that you share with the audience, with your reader. You make it last because that's typically what the reader latches onto and absorbs the most. As they move on to the next paragraph, the next page, whatever it is, that last piece of information that you put in their head is what they carry forward. And if you try to jam too much stuff into their mind, then they'll lose everything but that. So you definitely want to make sure that, I think, the knife is likely the most important detail.
Yeah.
So
This is the brother that's coming for revenge.
yeah. Okay. Now, how would you describe his essence? Oops.
Essence of DR.
Yeah.
Angry. At the same time, decisive about what he's doing. He's no what he's going for. He knows what he should do, and he would do it because it's because for these people it's about honor. So honor is like a life and death thing. So it's
What's
like
his reputation amongst the villagers? What is his reputation? How would you describe him? How is he known?
he's from another village, so we can't say that they don't know him. But this is about honor. This is about life for life, eye for an eye.
Okay. So I don't know that you would describe it this way. Again, that's just an example of trying to capture the energy and the essence and the point of view of the character. So something like that lets the audience know what's going on in his mind, but without saying what's going on in his mind.
Okay.
This is as close as you can get to entering the mind of your character, because we can't tell them that he's feeling judgmental or he's there as judge, jury, and executioner, or however you'd want to describe that. But we can describe his face and suggest that there is judgment on his face. You know, that's okay, because that's technically a reference to what he looks like and what can be up on the screen. So,
Jordan, I'm so sorry. Can you just give me like a minute? My folks are leaving for vacation. I just want to say goodbye. I'm gonna get back. Just give me a second. I'm gonna be right there.
Okay, yeah, we'll wind down. I'm just gonna do a couple more tinkers here, and then we'll wrap it up.
Morit had a question. He said, how do you know when to trim or cut a scene and when to let it be?
I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't apologize. Say it's all good. My answer to that question would be try it, cut it, and if the story doesn't work anymore, then you know that it should have stayed.
Yeah.
But if the story still works, then you know that cutting it is the right idea. So there's so many things that are specific to the exact script and everything like that, that the nuance of it is going to be lost in this conversation. But start there. Try by cutting, and then if the next person reading it is confused, then you know that was a mistake. But if they don't bat an eye, then that was the right choice. That's basically the easiest way to think about it.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Jordan, I want to say something because you said something that is really, I really like that. You said that we can, when we want to share information, we can do it gradually, right? For example, for the clothing. I was thinking that maybe right now we can cut the kafia, and then we can add it on the next scene because this is the time that he goes into the house to kill Masood. So maybe we can use kafia on that scene.
Sure.
Wouldn't make it better? Yeah.
Sure. It's again, I apologize for any kind of cultural ignorance, but I want to be able to see people's faces too. So if we don't have his face covered in this first scene, we're going to be able to see his emotional kind of state of mind and let the actor kind of project that for the sake of the story and for the reader, the audience member.
Oh, okay.
So that would be great if we can do that. If it's more appropriate to the story that he is covered, then so be it. We work around that. And then we talk about his posture, you know, and the type of strides that he takes when he marches towards the house. We can make him seem really authoritarian with those kind of descriptions as well. It just depends. But this is the Prosdokian, which is sometimes referred to as the punchline structure. So the last piece of information is always the most important, right? I just flew in, and boy, are my arms tired, is the old joke. You can't appreciate the joke until you hear the final word. That's kind of what to keep in mind when you're structuring your sentences and your paragraphs as well. Give it some punch. So each individual line, each individual paragraph, each individual scene has a button. And the final kind of detail is the button. So this suggests a guy on a mission, and he's obviously serious because he's holding the knife. And I've capped the knife because that's an important detail in the scene. And I want the production staff to make note of, we need this man to be carrying a knife. And then if you wanted to get into the details of it, if it's a ceremonial knife or something like that, then we'd want to be able to use that kind of descriptors here as well. Because what type of knife it is also says a lot about what the scene is too. This man's not going to be carrying a switchblade. This man's not going to be carrying like a Bowie knife, like an American hunter's knife or anything like that. The type of knife he's holding is likely very specific.
Yeah, it would be a dagger, maybe.
A dagger. There you go. Okay, even just the changing to that word says a lot. Yeah. Okay, that's great. Yeah, we didn't get to the 5 pages, but there's so much to talk about when it comes to Pagecraft that I hope we've kind of at least illustrated how many different choices that you're making and why they're important and how they can help you tell your story and make it a more enjoyable read for the reader. Thinking about how to present things in a more cinematic manner. And then on top of that, further down the road, developing your own personal style with which to do that also is really, really important. And that's all part of the process of what I do when I'm helping new writers kind of find their way. And it's super fun. So I really appreciate you letting me kind of, again, crash around in your sandbox with this site. It was awesome.
Of course, yeah, it was my pleasure. Thank you, Oliver. Thank you. I'm really, I love that, and I learned a lot. And I have a question for you, Jordan.
Sure.
Something worries me is that you said that for a minute reading, we should have a minute. For a minute writing, we actually minute reading. Now I'm coming a bit cynical about screenplays that I'm reading, because I think that, for example, I don't know, like the writers made them more personal in versus of more, professional business type of thing. So would it be better to read screenplays for example, for the time of the classic Hollywood? We just say the movies in the 90s, they would be more loyal to, because I'm seeing a lot of difference right here, because as I'm thinking about, for example, when I'm reading another screenplays, it's mostly that personal style, especially when they are filmmakers, that they don't care about being in the guideline that we just did in these pages. So we just say that, for example, I don't know, like a screenplay from Casablanca, or from, for example, I don't know, a screenplay in the 90s, that they are more regular, maybe more loyal to the rules. It would be better to adopt this kind of a visual storytelling.
I think reading from all eras is a really good idea. I don't think you can read too much, and I don't think it's ever a bad thing to sample different styles from different eras and different genres, because everybody's going to be using a different language. Every genre has a unique kind of grammar to it and a unique set of kind of expectations from audiences. So that's an important thing to keep in mind as well, that when you sit down and commit to writing a screenplay, you are committing to being a specialist in your genre. And you better know everything there is to know about that genre. And then back on the subject of style, the rules do change. Like Pagecraft has evolved. So I point everybody at Walter Hill's copy of Alien from 1979, but that is not really what's going on right now. I just recommend that everybody read it because it is such an impressive display of conciseness that he literally has a 100-page haiku there. Like, there's so much white space on his pages, and he uses so few words to tell the story. It's really impressive. It's like next level type of Pagecraft. But not many people write in that style. I just use it as kind of an aspirational thing to show people what's possible and how extreme it can get. But again, Pagecraft has evolved. You have to keep that in mind. So I still think that reading modern scripts is a good idea. And then maybe the big production company scripts aren't what you should be reading. Maybe you should be hunting down production companies more like A24. That is a really interesting kind of independent. They're not really independent anymore. They're way too big for that. They did Everything Everywhere All at Once, and that was their biggest hit ever. Prior to that, they were making much smaller movies, and now they're getting into television and everything. But they do tend to lean towards writers and filmmakers with really distinct points of views and voices. So that's always good, is to see those people kind of doing their thing. Yeah, some of the studio stuff right now is pretty banal and boring and derivative. So that might not be where you find your best inspiration. So look for the smaller companies and those really, really unusual voices. Even if you don't like the movie, just read it for the sake of watching the craft of that particular writer at work. Like voices like Ari Aster, it comes to mind, right? That guy showed up and made Hereditary in his first film, which is crazy. Whether you like that film or not, that was impressive. And he has a very distinct voice. So look for those kind of young up-and-comers like that, and see what's out there. But generally speaking, read everything, because it's never a bad idea to keep reading and learning from other people. Arzalan had a question too. Do you believe co-writing the script with another writer is better earlier in your career? Well, that really comes down to the person that you're co-writing with and how strong your relationship is. I can't say yes or no. This program that I'm working with here today is called Art Studio, and it's great for collaboration because it's a single document that both collaborators can get to in real time. So when I'm working with clients, I leave notes off to the side, and while they're writing, I just kind of follow them through the screenplay, and that's a great way to do it. Instead of having to send copies of the scripts back and forth, you can both be kind of working on it at the same time. If you've got a friend that you can trust that well, who digs the process and likes to share their work and is willing to talk about it, then that's great. Collaborating early on is really, really good. In theory, if it's done well, you're going to be teaching each other stuff, which will accelerate how quickly you learn, because you're both going to be tackling different problems at different times. And then if you talk to the other person about the problems that you're having, then together you can probably come up with better solutions than you could alone. But that's really going to come down to your relationship with that person. You know, if it's not a really rock solid relationship, it can be a nightmare. So you got to keep that in mind too. Anything else, or Oliver? What do you think as we wrap up here?
I'm just amazed by how much I didn't realize how much I didn't know before this session. I'm going to be going back over and definitely changing my screenplay quite a lot. One of the big takeaways from this, I think, is white space is a good thing, and like you want to make everything more concise, and because of that, it just makes it easier for the reader to get through the screenplay. If it's too blocky, then it's just not very attractive for the reader. And I didn't realize this for a long time, because there's a lot of screenplays out there that are great screenplays, great films, but they write very blocky, especially older films. And I used to think that was how it was supposed to be done. But like you said, like Pagecraft has changed over the years, and you want to keep up to date with it, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, during the studio years, up until the 60s, when the studio system originally fell apart and the indie film scene kind of came to life with movies like Easy Rider and stuff like that, they were way more specific, and they would have camera angles and all that kind of stuff in it. They would over-explain everything. And then it got a lot looser and lighter. And now white space is really important, because the idea now is that the old 1 page equals 1 minute of screen time formula suggests that it should be as easy to read as it is to watch. Just think about that for a second. So it should be as easy to read and understand as sitting there and simply watching it play out on the screen. So that's why if there's any confusion in your descriptions and the person has to slow down and decipher it, you're dead. Or if there's a big chunk of dialogue or description like you'd find in a novel, and they have to slow down to push through that and slowly kind of absorb all the details in that, then you've lost there too. That's not what like reading a movie is like, because it has to be like watching a film. They call it the waterfall effect. So if you've got it all kind of presented on the page in a really effortless way, your eyes just kind of fall down the page like a waterfall.
Yeah.
And there's no question about what it is we're seeing in our mind. And there's no question about the meaning behind it, really, like as far as the literal presentation on the screen goes. Again, the kind of thematic meaning of things or the subtext of scenes is different. That can be interpreted, but the details that appear on the screen can't be interpreted. They've got to be precise and specific. So precision means conciseness, literally as few words as you can to describe what you need, which leaves more room on the page, and it makes it a much faster, more effortless read for the reader. That's what you're shooting for these days.
Yeah, absolutely. And another big take that I got, so the screenplay that I'm writing at the moment, a big part of it takes place in an apartment. So there's just different locations of the apartment, the bedroom, the living room. And if I'm writing interior, the location of the room in the apartment, day, and then the character goes into a different room, and I write that whole line again, it looks messy, doesn't it? But like you said, more screenplays now. What did you call it? What was it called? The mini, where you just say the bedroom, the living room. What's the name for that?
A mini slug. Yeah, because a
Mini
scene
slug.
heading is known as a scene heading and slug line are used interchangeably.
Okay.
So a slug line is a scene heading, but a mini slug, it acts like a scene heading, but it isn't. It's a special kind of term, and you can use it on POV, like Saeed was going to do there, or later, or flashback. You know, those are all kind of mini slug devices. Yeah, so if you take a little bit of time in your very contained story, contained meaning it has very few locations, like different rooms of the same apartment building, and you just give the reader the contextual details they need to be able to picture the room the first time you go in, then after that, the read gets really fast, because then you just have to say kitchen. You've already described what it's like.
Yeah.
The reader already knows the layout. So now your characters can really move around freely without you having to slow the read down by reestablishing a full scene heading for every kind of change in location. Yeah, that's fun when you can get to that speed. And again, that starts to really kind of emerge off the page around draft 3, 4 in my experience, where you get really, really effective at painting these images, and your transitions from scene to scene get really, really smooth and organic. And you're thinking about how to draw the reader through from scene to scene and make sure that they're not being confused by the jumps in time or jumps in space. Yeah, all that stuff comes a little bit later, but it's really, really fun to extract. It's like you're you know, digging through all of the ingredients and looking for just the ones that you need. And those are the ones that you keep. Everything else goes.
Yeah, brilliant advice. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any final questions here, or are we ready to wrap?
Yeah. Jordan, I want to kindly request you that can I have this revised version that I just did?
Yeah, I'll save it and I'll send it back.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
I have
Jordan,
a feeling you're going to use this.
Yeah, dude, definitely I'm going to use this. This was amazing. Just I don't know what to say. Just thank you.
That's my pleasure. Yeah, it's super fun. This is what I enjoy doing. I love the fact that I get to do this.
You're doing it amazing. I'm really impressed.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's my treat. We'll do something again another time. You know, Oliver, if you get to the point where you're comfortable with your script, let's say this too. Let's draw attention to the fact that it takes a lot to share your work openly with other people, right? These are our babies, but I'm telling you, if you believe anything that I say, know that sharing your work often throughout the process and with the right kind of people is really, really valuable. You've got to do it. You can't find like success in a silo, hiding your work from other people. That's really not how it works. We've all got this kind of romantic idea about a writer going away to a cabin in the woods or working quietly in a corner of a French cafe.
Oh my God! I was talking to Oliver. Do you remember we just talk about this yesterday? I was like talking to Oliver that this is such an amazing picture that I'm just in my desk and writing these amazing screenplays and winning the awards and winning, like, for example, these programs. And I'm like a wizard. But exactly what you say. I always use the opportunity to share my work because I believe this is one of the ways that I can grow as a screenwriter, as a storyteller.
Yeah, and let's face it, at a really practical level, you need to know that your work is working. You can't assume that what you're doing is being effective. You have to test it out on people. And friends and family don't count because they love you and they'll say nice things. Right?
They'll be biased.
So you need somebody that's another writer or somebody that can appreciate what you're trying to do as best you can. Joining writers groups like this and sharing your work amongst yourselves, super important. And whenever you get a chance to share your work with somebody who's a little further down the road than you are, then take that opportunity. Don't be afraid of it, because the only reason it would be a a negative experience, even if they blast you and tear your work to shreds, which is unfortunate and it shouldn't be that way, but it might happen. The only way that's actually a negative experience is if you don't take something away from that you can use to get better. So if they just say, I didn't like it, that's not very useful. And never let somebody get away with that. Then say why. Why didn't you like it? Why did this moment confuse you? Why didn't you like this particular idea in the movie? Ask a ton of why questions. And then even if somebody really is critical of your work, you'll walk away armed with all kinds of new ideas that you can use to improve your work and make it better. So get used to that and use that to your advantage.
Absolutely. 100%. Big, yeah, great advice. Yeah, Morwood said, for me, you get so familiar with your script to the point where you can't judge it. So that's why I think sharing it really matters. Yeah,
Really
I totally
good point.
agree.
Yeah, you lose perspective on it because you've been
Yeah.
staring at it for so long, for sure, 100%. So that's why a really good ally that you can count on to say, you may walk away thinking, oh, I've got it all figured out. It's perfect. You want somebody that you can trust to tell you, actually, no, this is not working at all. This is still trash. You've got more work to do. That's good. That's good for you. It just pushes you to become a better writer. So again, yeah, get used to that because it's an important part of the business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Definitely keep showing our work to each other, guys, and ask for feedback. That's what the community's for. This is exactly what more screenwriters need to be doing this. I think there's too many of us maybe just being isolated to ourselves, and then we're not really making any progress because we're not sharing our stuff. So yeah, this is great. This has been really great, Jordan. Thank you so much for doing this, and we'll have to do this again sometime, definitely.
I look forward to it. That was great. Thanks
Thank
again.
you, Todd.
Jordan, just one last thing. What do you think about the story? Do you like it?
Yeah, I like where you're going with it. I wasn't kidding. I wasn't blowing smoke at you when I said this is more solid than most of the first drafts that I see. So
thank you so much.
Your instincts are good. And there's a lot of potential in there that you can still draw out of it too, which again is Pagecraft related.
Yeah, and just it shows me how much I've been oblivion about this, and like for example, the Once Upon a Once and Everyone Only Once, that screenplay is so vivid, so the storytelling is so visual that I was telling Ollie the other day that it just made me picture all the scenes all together.
Yeah, that's great. I'm glad you found it inspiring. That's a great one.
Yeah, awesome. Well, yeah, well, thank you guys so much for coming, and yeah, we'll definitely do this again sometime, Jordan. Hopefully, thank you so much again for doing this. This has been great.
You're welcome. All right, everyone, have a great day.
Peace out,
Jordan, take care.
guys.
Bye.
Thanks for coming,
Cheers.
guys.
Yeah, of course.